Richard Feynman was more than just a brilliant physicist. He was a true master of understanding. Feynman didn't just memorize equations or abstract theories. He understood them at a deep, intuitive level. This made him not only a great scientist, but also an incredible teacher and communicator. What set him apart from many others in his field was his ability to simplify complex ideas and explain them in a way that anyone could grasp. Feynman's approach to learning was rooted in curiosity and a deep desire to truly understand how things work, not just repeat what others have said. He was known for his unconventional methods, including the famous Feynman technique. But before diving into his learning system, it's important to understand why it worked so effectively. His system was not about memorizing facts or equations. It was about thinking deeply and making the learning process fun and engaging. His method encourages learners to engage with the material in a way that feels personal and intuitive, fostering not just knowledge, but also the ability to apply that knowledge in real-world situations. At the core of Feynman's system is the principle of teaching as a means of learning. He believed that teaching others was one of the best ways to test your own understanding. If you can explain something clearly to someone else, then you truly understand it. In this section, we explore Feynman's own background and how his methods allowed him to tackle some of the most complex problems in physics, from the quantum mechanics of particle physics to the challenging concepts of electromagnetism. Feynman's learning system was born from his experience in these subjects and his ability to break them down into simple, digestible parts of skill that made him a legendary figure in the scientific community. The core principle of Feynman's learning system is deceptively simple. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it. This means that learning isn't just about memorizing information. It's about internalizing it to the point where you can explain it in simple, everyday terms. The beauty of this method is that it works for any subject, whether it's mathematics, science, history, or even philosophy. Feynman believed that simplification was the key to understanding. The idea is to take complex concepts and break them down until they are easy to explain to anyone, whether that person is a peer, a colleague, or a 5-year-old. This method forces learners to go beyond surface-level understanding and think about the underlying principles that make something work. What makes this method so effective is that it actively engages the learner. Instead of passively absorbing information, the Feynman technique involves constant self-testing through teaching. When you attempt to explain something, you inevitably run into areas where your understanding is shallow or incomplete. This allows you to pinpoint gaps in your knowledge and go back to the material to fill them. In essence, the technique makes learning an interactive process. It encourages deep reflection and mental engagement with the subject matter, fostering a long-lasting connection to the material. By explaining the material in simple terms, the learner is forced to truly understand it, not just memorize it. One of the most effective aspects of Feynman's learning system is the time management component, specifically the 30-minute learning session. Feynman advocated for learning in short, focused bursts rather than long, drawn-out study sessions. The idea is that our brains are more efficient when we work in smaller time blocks with short breaks in between. Why 30 minutes? Research on attention and memory shows that the brain can only stay focused for a certain period of time before it begins to lose efficiency. By limiting learning sessions to 30 minutes, you're able to maintain a high level of focus and productivity without burning out. This also helps with retention, as shorter sessions are easier for the brain to absorb and process. The key to the 30-minute learning session is focused intensity. Feynman believed that in such a short period of time, the brain is primed to absorb a significant amount of material, especially when you're actively engaging with it through methods like teaching, questioning, and simplifying. In practical terms, this approach works by eliminating distractions, setting a clear learning goal for each 30-minute session, and diving deep into the material. It's not about trying to cover as much ground as possible, but about ensuring that each minute is focused on meaningful engagement with the subject matter. You might not master an entire subject in 30 minutes, but you will make substantial progress by the end of each focused session. Feynman's belief that teaching is the best form of learning is a core pillar of his learning system. In fact, the learning process isn't complete until the learner has attempted to teach the material to someone else. This could be a friend, a family member, or even an imaginary audience. The idea is that if you can't explain the material clearly to someone else, then you haven't fully internalized it yourself. Teaching forces you to clarify your thinking. It helps you identify the gaps in your understanding, as you will inevitably encounter difficulties when trying to explain a concept in simple terms. If you can explain a topic in a way that anyone can understand, then you have truly mastered it. This process is often referred to as the Feynman technique, and it's a valuable tool for learners of all kinds. Whether you're a student studying for an exam or a professional trying to learn a new skill, explaining what you've learned forces you to simplify and clarify your understanding. The process also helps with memory retention, as teaching reinforces the neural connections related to the material. Feynman's approach to teaching emphasizes clarity and simplicity. When you explain a concept in plain language, you're forced to remove the jargon and technical language that often clouds understanding. This method isn't just about memorizing facts, it's about truly understanding the underlying principles. What makes Feynman's learning method so effective isn't just the technique itself, it's also rooted in the psychology of how our brains learn and process information. Cognitive psychology has shown that we remember things much better when we engage with them in a meaningful way, rather than passively absorbing information. Feynman's method emphasizes this active engagement, forcing learners to process material, simplify it, and then teach it. One of the psychological principles that Feynman's method taps into is active recall. When you try to explain something, your brain works harder to retrieve information and link it to other concepts. This strengthens the neural connections associated with the material, making it easier to remember in the future. Furthermore, Feynman's technique works by encouraging self-reflection. The act of teaching forces the learner to think critically about their own understanding and assess whether they've missed any important details. This process of self-assessment helps improve both memory and comprehension. Lastly, Feynman's method is effective because it encourages curiosity. By constantly simplifying and explaining, learners become more engaged with the material and more motivated to deepen their understanding. This method of learning, rooted in curiosity and active engagement, helps learners build a lasting foundation of knowledge that goes beyond short-term memorization. To successfully implement Feynman's 30-minute learning system, the first step is choosing the right resources. Having high-quality material to study is crucial, as it sets the foundation for all subsequent learning. Good resources serve as the backbone of your understanding, offering clarity and structured information that is easy to absorb. However, not all resources are created equal. The right resource should be clear, well-organized, and engaging. When selecting learning materials, the first consideration should be clarity. Textbooks or articles that are filled with jargon and overly technical language can create barriers to understanding. Choose materials that explain concepts in a straightforward and accessible manner. Resources like online tutorials, introductory books, or educational videos that break down complex ideas are ideal for beginners. Next, consider the structure of the material. A well-organized resource presents information in a progressive manner, starting with basic concepts and gradually moving to more complex ideas. This step-by-step approach is essential for maintaining the logical flow in your learning process and ensuring that each 30-minute learning block builds upon the previous one. Finally, ensure that the resource aligns with your learning goals. If you're trying to learn a new subject, make sure the resource offers a broad overview that covers the foundational concepts. If you're focusing on a specific area within a field, find material that dives deep into that particular aspect. Resources that offer exercises and problem-solving opportunities are also great, as they allow you to actively engage with the material. By carefully selecting the right resources, you can ensure that your learning experience is effective, efficient, and enriching. The key to mastering the Feynman technique is not just about working harder, it's about working smarter with the right tools at your disposal. Once you've selected your resources, the next step is to create a study schedule that aligns with the 30-minute learning blocks in Feynman's system. Time management is crucial for success with this method, and setting aside dedicated time each day to focus solely on learning can help make the process more efficient and effective. To get started, divide your day into focused learning sessions. Feynman's 30-minute method works best when the learner is able to maintain high levels of focus, so aim for blocks of 30 minutes with short breaks in between. It's important to avoid studying for longer periods without breaks, as this can lead to mental fatigue and reduce the effectiveness of the learning session. A simple structure could be 30 minutes of study, 5-10-minute break. Repeat. This cycle can be repeated as needed, depending on the amount of content you wish to cover in a day. If you find that 30 minutes isn't enough to fully understand a concept, feel free to add additional time in increments, but avoid overloading yourself. The key is to make the most of each focused session without feeling rushed or overwhelmed. When creating your schedule, be sure to set clear learning goals for each session. For example, if you're learning a chapter of a physics textbook, you could set a goal to understand a specific concept within that chapter in each 30-minute session. This ensures that you stay on track and don't get bogged down with irrelevant information. Writing down these goals at the beginning of each study session helps direct your focus and gives you a sense of accomplishment once the session ends. You should also account for revision time in your schedule. Feynman's system is all about reinforcing knowledge through teaching and simplifying, so revisiting material after a few days is key to retaining the information long term. Use your breaks to reflect on what you've learned and prepare for the next session. Lastly, ensure your study schedule is flexible enough to adapt to your changing needs. As you become more comfortable with the Feynman system, you may find that you need less time to explain and simplify certain topics. On the other hand, you may encounter more difficult material that requires longer learning sessions. Keep your schedule adaptable to suit your progress and needs. The physical and mental environment you study in plays a significant role in how effectively you can implement Feynman's 30-minute learning technique. Distractions are one of the biggest barriers to focused learning, and setting up a conducive space is essential for maximizing the effectiveness of your learning sessions. Start by choosing a quiet, organized space free from distractions. A clean desk or a dedicated study area will help you focus more effectively than a cluttered or noisy environment. Consider turning off notifications on your phone or using apps like Forest or Focus at Will to stay focused during your learning blocks. A dedicated workspace ensures that you associate this space with focused learning, helping you mentally prepare for each study session. In addition to physical space, it's essential to cultivate the right mental mindset before beginning a learning session. Feynman's technique requires intense focus, so take a few minutes before each session to clear your mind, whether it's through deep breathing, meditation, or simply taking a moment of silence. Entering a state of focus will help you make the most of your 30 minutes. Consider also mental cues, things like having a specific learning notebook or even a learning playlist that you listen to during study sessions. These small habits can prime your brain to get into learning mode and stay there. Additionally, having a dedicated spot to store all of your materials, such as books, notes, or digital files, will help you stay organized and reduce the time spent looking for resources during your study time. Finally, keep refreshments handy, but avoid sugary or caffeinated drinks that may lead to energy crashes. Water and healthy snacks can help keep your mind sharp and prevent distractions caused by hunger or fatigue. This preparation ensures that when you sit down to learn, you can fully immerse yourself in the material without any disruptions. By setting up an environment that fosters concentration and minimizes distractions, you can fully engage with the Feynman method and maximize your learning potential. Effective learning sessions don't just happen, they require careful planning and execution. Feynman's system hinges on taking full advantage of the 30-minute time frame to maximize understanding and retention. Here's how you can start a session with intent and purpose. Before you begin each learning session, start by setting a clear goal for what you want to accomplish. This goal could be a specific concept you wish to understand, an equation you want to memorize, or a technique you want to apply. Break the larger material down into bite-sized objectives so that you can make steady progress during each session. Start by reviewing what you already know about the topic. Active recall is key. Here, try to recall. Instructive recall is key here. Try to recall any relevant concepts from memory before diving into the material. This helps activate your prior knowledge and gives you a framework for absorbing new information. Next, read through the material, focusing on the key ideas and taking brief notes. The goal is not to memorize, but to engage with the content. Afterward, spend the remaining time explaining what you've learned, either aloud or in writing. As you try to teach the material, you'll likely come across areas where your understanding is weak. This is where Feynman's technique truly shines. The act of explaining forces you to actively identify gaps in your knowledge and clarify concepts that are still unclear. These moments are critical for learning, as they pinpoint areas that need further study. Once you've identified your gaps, you can go back to your resource and spend additional time on the tricky parts. After the 30-minute session is complete, take a short break to refresh your mind. This helps maintain your mental energy and prepares you for the next session. Reflect on your progress and set new goals for the next learning block. By planning each session with clear goals and following the structure of Feynman's technique, you will find that your learning sessions become more productive, focused, and fulfilling. Adopting a new learning technique is never without its challenges. When starting with Feynman's system, many learners face initial hurdles, whether it's frustration with the process, difficulty simplifying concepts, or simply staying motivated. Overcoming these challenges is key to ensuring long-term success with this method. One common challenge is the tendency to overcomplicate things at first. When attempting to explain a concept, it's easy to get caught up in technical jargon or elaborate explanations. Feynman's technique emphasizes simplicity, so it's important to remind yourself to break things down into basic terms. If you find yourself using complex words, it's a sign that you haven't fully internalized the concept yet. Another hurdle is the feeling of inadequacy when you can't explain something clearly. It's important to remember that this is not a sign of failure, but an opportunity to identify gaps in your knowledge and fill them. Embrace these moments of confusion, as they are where the real learning happens. Take the time to go back to your resources and revisit the concepts that you couldn't explain. Finally, staying motivated can be difficult, especially when progress feels slow. The key here is to celebrate small wins, such as successfully simplifying a concept or explaining it clearly to someone else. The act of teaching reinforces the learning process, and seeing these small milestones will help keep you motivated and committed to the method. By understanding and accepting these challenges, you can push through the initial discomfort and set yourself up for long-term success with Feynman's system. At the heart of Richard Feynman's learning system is a straightforward yet highly effective process for mastering complex topics. This process consists of 4 key steps: choosing a topic, teaching the material, identifying gaps, and simplifying concepts. These steps are designed to engage the learner actively, ensuring that they not only understand the material but can also apply it in practical scenarios. Step 1. Choose the topic. The first step is to identify the concept or subject you want to learn. This may seem obvious, but choosing a topic involves more than just picking something from a textbook. It's important to select a topic that is specific, focused, and manageable for a single learning session. Rather than trying to master an entire field in one go, break it down into smaller chunks. For instance, instead of studying all of quantum mechanics, focus on one concept, like wave-particle duality or Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. This enables you to tackle smaller ideas that form the foundation of larger concepts. Step 2. Teach the material. Feynman's technique truly shines in this step. The act of teaching is a powerful tool for deep learning. Once you've studied the material, the next step is to explain it to someone else, or, if that's not possible, to imagine explaining it aloud. The key is to simplify the material and break it down into words and ideas that can be understood by anyone, even a child. If you can't explain it simply, then you don't truly understand it yet. Teaching forces you to focus on the core principles and simplify complex ideas, stripping away the unnecessary jargon. This process brings clarity and ensures that the material is thoroughly absorbed. If you find it difficult to teach a specific concept, it's a sign that you need to go back to the material and engage with it further. Step 3. Identify gaps. As you explain the material, you'll inevitably encounter gaps in your understanding. These gaps are often invisible when you're passively learning, but when you try to teach, they become apparent. Feynman recognized that these gaps are critical to the learning process. The moment you notice a gap, it's time to return to the material and fill in those missing pieces. This step is vital because it ensures that your understanding is complete and coherent. When identifying gaps, it's important to ask yourself questions like, what part of this concept is still unclear to me? Why can't I explain this in simple terms? What needs more clarification? Step 4. Simplify and re-explain. Once you've identified and filled the gaps, The final step is to simplify the material even further. By now, you should have a clearer understanding of the topic, and you'll likely find that you can explain it with even more clarity and confidence. This process of reduction and simplification helps solidify the material in your long-term memory. Feynman's method is a feedback loop. The more you simplify and explain, the deeper your understanding becomes. This method ensures that learning is not just about acquiring knowledge, but about mastering and retaining that knowledge in a meaningful way. One of the most powerful aspects of Feynman's learning method is the emphasis on teaching others as a way to test and reinforce your own understanding. However, teaching isn't just about explaining the material in any manner, it's about teaching in simple terms that anyone can understand. This step, when done properly, significantly enhances the quality of your learning. The first step. Find your audience. The first step in teaching the material is to determine your audience. If you're teaching an imaginary audience, consider who they are and what their background is. Imagine that you're explaining the concept to someone who is completely unfamiliar with the subject matter, someone who doesn't have the technical jargon or prior knowledge. This helps you avoid overcomplicating things with complex terms or concepts that are difficult to grasp. The second step. Use simple language. To teach effectively, you must translate complex ideas into simple language. Feynman's genius was in his ability to break down even the most complicated theories into concepts that anyone could understand. Use analogies, metaphors, and everyday examples that make the material more accessible. For example, instead of diving into mathematical formulas right away, explain the core concept in terms of familiar objects or situations. By doing this, you're not just teaching the material, you're also ensuring that you truly understand it on a deep level. The third step. Teach actively. Simply talking about the material isn't enough. You need to actively engage with it. One way to do this is by questioning the material as you explain it. Ask yourself, what makes this concept work? How can I relate it to something I already know? Why is this idea important? By consistently questioning the material as you teach, you're forcing yourself to think critically about it. This active engagement further solidifies your understanding and ensures that you're not just passively repeating what you've read or heard. The fourth step. Identify weaknesses. As you explain the concept, you'll inevitably discover areas where your understanding is still shaky. This is normal and part of the learning process. When you come across a weak point, it's important to pause and return to the material. Use the opportunity to clarify and simplify the concept. Only when you can teach the concept fluently and without hesitation can you be confident that you've truly learned it. One of the most significant advantages of Feynman's method is that it forces you to confront gaps in your knowledge. This step is crucial because it moves you beyond surface-level learning and challenges you to truly internalize the material. Identifying gaps in your understanding ensures that you aren't just memorizing information, but actually comprehending it. The process of identifying gaps. When you attempt to teach or explain the material, you'll likely find that certain sections don't make sense or are difficult to explain in simple terms. These are the gaps in your understanding. The goal here isn't to brush them aside, but to confront them head-on. Ask yourself questions such as, what part of this concept do I struggle to explain? What part of the material is still unclear to me? Where do I feel unsure, and why? Finding the source of the gap. Once you've identified a gap, the next step is to figure out why it exists. Is it because you missed a key step in the explanation? Did you skip a foundational concept? Or perhaps the concept is simply more complex than you first realized. Understanding the source of the gap allows you to pinpoint exactly what needs to be revisited or clarified. Addressing the gap. Once you've identified the gap, it's time to go back to the source. This means revisiting your learning materials, reading different explanations, or watching different videos on the topic. The goal is to clarify the material until you can explain it clearly and confidently. Don't rush this step. Go over the material until you understand it thoroughly. By filling in the gaps, you ensure that your learning is complete and solid. Feynman's learning system emphasizes the importance of simplicity in mastering any topic. By simplifying complex ideas, we can make them more digestible and memorable. The principle of simplicity is what makes Feynman's method so effective, as it forces the learner to focus on the core principles and discard unnecessary complexity. Why simplicity works. The power of simplicity lies in its ability to cut through the clutter. When you simplify a concept, you get to the heart of what it's all about. This allows your brain to form stronger neural connections and makes the material easier to retain. Simplicity also prevents overwhelm, which can often occur when trying to learn complex subjects. By focusing on the essentials, you're able to retain more without feeling lost in the weeds. How to simplify complex concepts. One of the best ways to simplify a concept is to use analogies. Analogies work because they help connect new, abstract ideas to familiar experiences. For example, to explain the concept of electromagnetic waves, you might compare them to ripples in a pond, where the waves spread out and carry energy. This analogy makes the concept more concrete and easier to understand. Another way to simplify is by breaking down the material into smaller chunks. Instead of trying to understand the entire theory of relativity in one go, break it down into smaller concepts like space-time, gravitational waves, and mass-energy equivalents. This allows you to digest the information bit by bit and build a stronger understanding over time. The benefits of simplicity. By simplifying complex material, you ensure that you're truly understanding it rather than memorizing it. Feynman's technique emphasizes that if you can't explain something simply, then you haven't fully grasped it. The simpler you can make a concept, the more likely you are to retain it and apply it effectively. Learning isn't a one-time event, it's an ongoing process that requires repetition and reinforcement to make knowledge stick. Feynman's technique relies on active repetition to ensure that what you've learned stays in your long-term memory. The power of spaced repetition. Spaced repetition is a technique that involves reviewing material at increasing intervals over time. This method is based on the forgetting curve, which suggests that we forget information over time unless we revisit it regularly. By spacing out your review sessions, you can combat forgetting and ensure that information is stored in your long-term memory. How to use repetition in Feynman's system. The key to using repetition effectively is active recall. Instead of passively reading over notes, actively test yourself on the material. This could involve trying to explain the concept again or writing it down from memory. Active recall strengthens your ability to retrieve the information later, solidifying your understanding. Additionally, don't just revisit the material after you've learned it once, keep coming back to it regularly, even after you think you've mastered it. This ongoing reinforcement ensures that you don't just remember the material, but can also apply it in real-life situations. One of the most powerful aspects of Feynman's learning system is its ability to break down even the most abstract concepts, in mathematics is no exception. While mathematics is often seen as a subject where rote memorization and formulaic learning are key, Feynman's technique encourages a deeper, more intuitive understanding that transcends mechanical problem solving. To apply Feynman's method to mathematics, the goal is to visualize mathematical concepts and focus on the why behind each equation. Start with the basics. When you first approach a mathematical concept, it's important to start with the fundamental principles. For example, if you're learning calculus, begin by understanding the basic concept of a derivative. Instead of immediately diving into complex equations, try to explain the idea behind it in simple terms. For instance, a derivative is the rate of change of a function, how something changes over time. To explain this, use an analogy such as speed, the rate at which distance changes with respect to time. Teach as you learn. Once you've grasped the basic idea, try to explain it in your own words. You could imagine explaining it to a friend who knows nothing about the subject. You'll quickly find that some parts of the concept will be difficult to explain, signaling areas where your understanding is still lacking. If you struggle with a certain formula or theorem, go back to the foundational concepts and work your way up again. Focus on visualization. Mathematics can often feel abstract, with equations and formulas that seem difficult to picture. Feynman's technique emphasizes the power of visualization to make abstract concepts concrete. For example, to understand integrals, imagine filling a shape with small pieces like measuring the area under a curve. When you visualize the equation, you create a mental picture that makes it easier to understand the underlying process. Identify gaps and simplify as you progress through more complex problems. The same process of identifying gaps in your understanding applies. If you encounter a concept that feels unclear, revisit the definitions and ask yourself, why does this formula work this way? What is it actually representing? By breaking down complex problems into simpler terms, you reinforce the connections between mathematical concepts, making them easier to understand and apply. Physics is another field that greatly benefits from the Feynman learning system, given its reliance on abstract theories and complex equations. However, Feynman's system teaches us that understanding physics is not just about memorizing formulas, it's about developing a deep, conceptual understanding of how the world works. The key to learning physics using Feynman's system is visualizing physical phenomena and simplifying complex equations into tangible concepts. Start with concepts, not formulas. When studying physics, the first step is to understand the core concepts. Take, for instance, Newton's laws of motion. Instead of starting with the mathematical equations, focus on the real-world phenomena they describe: why objects move, how forces interact, and how acceleration works. Once you've grasped the conceptual framework, then introduce the relevant formulas. By understanding what the equations represent, you gain a much deeper appreciation of their significance. Use analogies and visualization. Feynman was a master of using analogies to explain difficult concepts in physics. For instance, the idea of electricity can be compared to water flowing through a pipe. The voltage is like water pressure, the current is like the flow of water, and the resistance is like the width of the pipe. These analogies make it much easier to grasp the physical concepts behind the abstract math. Similarly, Feynman emphasized the importance of visualizing physical systems. Imagine you are shrinking down to the size of an electron and observing its interactions in an electromagnetic field. This kind of thought experiment helps you internalize the underlying physics rather than just memorizing equations. Break down complex problems. When solving physics problems, Feynman's technique of simplification is key. If you're struggling with a complex problem, break it down into smaller, simpler parts. Focus on understanding each part of the problem step by step before trying to piece everything together. Visualizing the scenario and thinking about how the physical principles apply can help guide you through the problem-solving process. Teach the concept. As with other subjects, the best way to ensure that you truly understand a concept in physics is to teach it to someone else. By explaining the problem, the theory, or the solution in simple terms, you reinforce your own understanding and identify any gaps that need to be addressed. While Feynman's system is often associated with technical subjects like math and science, it is equally powerful in the humanities. History, literature, and philosophy all benefit from the clear explanation and simplification that Feynman's technique promotes. However, instead of equations and formulas, you are simplifying ideas and narratives. Simplify complex ideas in history. When studying history, the key is to focus on understanding the underlying events and connections between different time periods or historical figures. For example, when studying World War II, rather than memorizing dates and events, try to understand the motivations behind key decisions made by the leaders at the time. What were the economic, social, and political factors that led to certain outcomes? Teaching this material in simple terms helps you focus on the causes and effects rather than getting lost in the details. Make use of storytelling. History is a narrative, and the Feynman method works well when you view it this way. Instead of focusing on names and dates, consider the story of human progress, conflict, and innovation. For instance, explaining the Industrial Revolution as the story of how new technologies changed the world and the lives of everyday people is more effective than memorizing the names of inventors and the timeline of events. Break down philosophical concepts. Philosophy can be daunting due to its abstract nature, but Feynman's method encourages you to simplify these ideas into easily digestible pieces. When studying a philosophical theory, such as existentialism, break down its core principles: freedom, individuality, meaning, and existence. Teach the ideas to yourself as if you're explaining them to someone unfamiliar with the field. By stripping away complex jargon and reducing the theory to its essentials, you can gain a much clearer understanding. Teaching humanities concepts. As with other subjects, teaching a concept in the humanities forces you to clarify your thinking. When explaining historical events or philosophical ideas, you'll quickly realize where your understanding is weak. This is an excellent opportunity to revisit sources and clarify concepts. Humanities subjects often have rich, layered meanings that require this process of continuous reflection and refinement. Learning a new language can seem overwhelming, especially when faced with vocabulary, grammar rules, and pronunciation. However, Feynman's method works wonders in language learning because it encourages active engagement with the material and emphasizes the importance of simplifying complex linguistic concepts. Start with basic vocabulary. When learning a language, begin with the core vocabulary, the most commonly used words in the language. Rather than memorizing long lists of words, try to understand how these words fit together in sentences and how they relate to each other. Teaching yourself the basic sentence structures in simple terms will give you a foundation to build on. Simplify grammar concepts. Grammar rules can be intimidating, but Feynman's method encourages breaking them down into their simplest forms. For example, instead of memorizing complex verb conjugations, focus on understanding the underlying patterns. How do verbs change based on tense, person, and number? Once you understand these basic rules, you can build on them without feeling overwhelmed. Teach what you've learned. To master a language, try explaining new words, phrases, and grammatical structures to someone else. If you don't have a partner, pretend to teach the material. Explain the grammar rules in simple terms, or try writing short sentences using new vocabulary. By teaching these concepts, you reinforce your own understanding and make the learning process more interactive. Repetition and reinforcement. Language learning requires constant practice and repetition. Use the Feynman technique to review what you've learned regularly. Teaching concepts, revisiting grammar, and practicing conversation all help reinforce the material and ensure long-term retention. The true value of Feynman's learning system is that it extends beyond academic subjects and into everyday problem-solving. The core principles of simplifying complex issues, identifying gaps, and teaching can be applied to challenges in daily life, making problem-solving more efficient and effective. Break down everyday challenges. When faced with a problem, whether it's fixing a broken appliance or figuring out how to plan a trip, use the Feynman technique to break the problem down into smaller, manageable parts. Rather than feeling overwhelmed by the entire situation, focus on understanding the core elements of the problem. What are the causes and potential solutions? Teach yourself how each part of the problem connects to the whole, and use this understanding to devise a solution. Simplify complex decisions. Feynman's method is particularly useful in decision-making. When confronted with a difficult decision, simplify it by identifying the underlying principles involved. What are the facts? What are the pros and cons? Use simple language to describe the situation and your options, just as you would explain it to someone else. This process removes the noise and helps you see the situation more clearly. Test solutions and reflect. Once a solution is proposed, it's important to test it and evaluate its effectiveness. Much like the scientific method, Feynman's technique encourages an iterative approach to problem solving. When a solution doesn't work, go back to the drawing board and identify where your understanding was incomplete. Reflecting on the problem and solution allows you to improve your thinking over time, making future problem solving even more effective. Mastery in any field is not achieved overnight. It's built through consistent, focused effort. Feynman's 30-minute learning system emphasizes short, focused sessions rather than long, drawn-out study periods. The goal is to make learning a habit, something you do regularly, with purpose and intent, without overwhelming yourself or burning out. The key to developing the habit of 30-minute learning sessions is to start small and gradually build momentum. Begin by setting aside specific times each day for your learning sessions. These sessions should be non-negotiable, just like a meeting or appointment. Try to schedule your sessions at times when you're most alert and focused, whether that's in the morning, after work, or during a quiet afternoon. At first, it might be challenging to stay disciplined for 30 minutes. You may find yourself easily distracted or wanting to switch topics. To overcome this, keep your sessions focused on a single task or topic, avoiding multitasking. For instance, in a 30-minute session, dedicate the full time to learning one concept, solving one problem, or reviewing one chapter. Once you've successfully established the 30-minute habit, gradually increase the number of sessions per day. You don't have to spend hours studying in one go. Just a few well-structured learning blocks can add up to significant progress over time. Consistency is what leads to mastery, and when you commit to a routine of regular, focused learning, you'll find that knowledge builds upon itself. To help with consistency, track your progress. Use a journal or a digital tool to log your sessions and reflect on what you've learned. Writing down your goals for each session and checking off tasks as you complete them reinforces your commitment to the process and provides a sense of accomplishment. One of the most powerful ways to maintain motivation and stay on course with the Feynman learning system is to track your progress and celebrate small wins along the way. Progress in learning is often gradual, and without tracking it, it can be easy to feel discouraged or to think you're not making any significant headway. By measuring your success, you give yourself the feedback you need to keep going. Start by setting clear goals for each study session. These goals should be specific and achievable. For example, instead of setting a goal like learn quantum mechanics, break it down into smaller, manageable chunks. Understand the concept of wave-particle duality, or learn the relationship between energy and frequency. Each time you complete one of these smaller goals, acknowledge your success. There are various tools you can use to track your progress. Journals or digital apps that allow you to log your learning sessions are great options. For instance, apps like Notion or Trello let you create detailed to-do lists and check off tasks as you complete them. Alternatively, a simple paper planner can work just as well, giving you a physical record of your progress. Celebrating small wins is essential because it helps you stay motivated and reminds you that learning is a journey, not a race. These moments of celebration don't have to be extravagant. Sometimes, simply acknowledging your progress, whether through a quick self-pat on the back or by rewarding yourself with a small treat, is enough. This helps solidify the habit and makes learning feel like an ongoing achievement rather than a burdensome task. Moreover, reflecting on these small wins helps reinforce your understanding of the material. When you celebrate a breakthrough in explaining a complex concept, it boosts your confidence and encourages you to continue pushing forward. It's common for learners to be intimidated by complex material. The idea of tackling difficult subjects, such as advanced physics or complex mathematical equations, can lead to fear and self-doubt. But one of the foundational principles of Feynman's system is that learning doesn't have to be difficult or overwhelming. The process of simplifying complex concepts is designed to make them more approachable and digestible. The first step in overcoming the fear of complexity is to change your mindset. Instead of approaching the material with anxiety or apprehension, approach it with curiosity, or apprehension, approach it with curiosity. Feynman himself loved to ask why. Why does something work the way it does, and how can I break it down into simpler terms? By focusing on understanding the fundamentals, you can chip away at the layers of complexity one step at a time. Another important strategy is to break the material down into smaller pieces. This is key in Feynman's method, as it encourages the learner to work through complex ideas gradually. If you're learning a new theory in physics, for example, start by mastering the basic concepts and slowly move on to more complicated ideas. This prevents you from getting overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information and helps you build confidence as you progress. If you encounter something that seems too complex to understand, don't be afraid to simplify it. Break it down using analogies, visual aids, or even personal experiences. Feynman's genius wasn't just in solving complex problems. It was in his ability to explain them in ways that made sense to everyone, even those with no background in the subject. Learning is about understanding the core principles first, before diving into the more intricate details. Lastly, remember that struggling with complexity is a sign of growth. The process of tackling something difficult and finding a way to simplify it is where true learning happens. Be patient with yourself and recognize that mastery comes from confronting and overcoming these challenges. As with any new skill or habit, maintaining momentum in the learning process can be difficult. There will be times when you feel fatigued, frustrated, or simply uninspired to continue. However, maintaining momentum is crucial for long-term success with Feynman's method, and it can be achieved by implementing a few strategies. First, it's important to break your learning sessions into small, manageable blocks. Rather than thinking about the entirety of what you have to learn, focus on one section at a time. This makes the process feel less overwhelming and ensures that you're constantly making progress, no matter how small. Next, vary your learning activities. It's easy to get bored if you're studying the same material in the same way each time. Mix things up by using different resources, such as videos, articles, or even interactive exercises. If you've been working with textbooks, try applying the material in a real-world context or explaining the concept to someone else. Another way to maintain momentum is by reminding yourself of your bigger goals. Feynman's learning system isn't just about memorizing information, it's about developing a deeper understanding of the world around you. Whenever you feel stuck or discouraged, take a step back and remind yourself why you're learning in the first place. This larger purpose will help push you through difficult moments. Finally, remember that learning is a marathon, not a sprint. Don't rush the process. Allow yourself to reflect, digest, and internalize the material fully. Over time, consistent effort will lead to mastery. The ultimate goal of Feynman's 30-minute learning method is to achieve mastery, not just surface-level knowledge, but a deep understanding of the material. Mastery isn't about memorizing facts or formulas. It's about connecting concepts and being able to apply them in real-world situations. With Feynman's system, you learn not just how things work, but why they work the way they do. The process of achieving mastery is deeply rewarding. By teaching others, simplifying complex ideas, and actively reflecting on the material, you gain a sense of confidence and competence that is hard to match. You no longer have to rely on rote memorization or vague recollections of what you've read. You have a solid, tangible understanding of the material that you can use to solve problems, answer questions, and make decisions. Mastery also means that you have the tools to continue learning on your own. Feynman's technique equips you with a set of strategies for tackling any new subject, whether it's math, science, languages, or anything else. Once you've developed the habit of simplifying, teaching, and identifying gaps in your understanding, you can apply these techniques to any challenge you encounter. The ultimate reward of Feynman's method is not just learning, but mastery, the ability to explain, apply, and internalize knowledge at a profound level. This sense of mastery not only boosts your confidence, but also enriches your life, as you become more curious, engaged, and empowered to solve problems and make informed decisions.